Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast, where I teach educated, successful couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships so that you can stop compromising and start feeling fully alive in your relationship. I'm Alexandra Stockwell, aka the Intimacy Doctor. I'm a physician, a relationship and intimacy coach, and I'm an intimate marriage expert. My husband and I have been married for 27 years. We have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing marriage. I've shown hundreds of couples how to do so as well. So if you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how. Now, let's dive in. Do you feel lonely in your relationship? I know you're in a relationship. Well, if you're not, you might feel lonely also. But I want to know, if you're in a relationship, do you feel lonely? And before I continue with that, I want to gratefully read a review left for my book, Uncompromising Intimacy, on Audible. I read these reviews for a few reasons. One is to give you a flavor of what people are saying to inspire you to take action, and also because I really hope that it will inspire you to leave a review as well, because you'll see how leaving a review for my podcast or for my book, Uncompromising Intimacy, it inspires other people when they read them or hear them. So I'm about to read one to you and hope it inspires you to leave one yourself. This is from Judith Hogg. This is a truly groundbreaking book on marriage and relationships that I would highly recommend. It will help your marriage go from good to great, awakening to the fact that it is possible to desire and achieve a high degree of intimacy and erotic intimacy in a long-term committed relationship. I absolutely love the fact that the author herself is reading her own book, as it gives an extra level of meaning to her words. Well, thank you, Judith, for that beautiful review. And if you haven't read Uncompromising Intimacy, my book, by all means, you can find it on Amazon or Audible, or you can click on the link in the show notes and get it that way as well. So back to this question, do you feel lonely in your relationship? I think that we tend to think that people who are alone are more likely to feel lonely. But in fact, that isn't the case. About 60% of lonely people are in marriages, are in long-lasting relationships. There are a variety of studies done, and the numbers range from 30 to a little over 60%. But the point is that a tremendous number of people who are in what seem to be good, happy marriages actually are profoundly lonely. I had this affirmed when I sent an email to my list. And by the way, if you don't receive my emails, I write them regularly and contains all kinds of content, tips, stories. I'm really just writing from the heart the way I would to a friend. So if you're not on my email list, feel free to click on the link in the show notes and sign up to receive them. Or, of course, you can go to my website, alexandrastockwell.com, and there's a place to sign up for my email list as well. Anyway, I wrote an email to everyone on my list about loneliness in marriage, and I received so many heartfelt responses. People who let me know that it really deeply resonates with them. And I've been there too. In fact, while preparing for this episode, I was remembering I had 3 children. I didn't have my 4th yet. Actually, I was pregnant with him, and I just felt so lonely, even though I had more time with my husband than I had in a long time. So let's unpack what this is. It obviously is not about not being together with someone. You are together. You may even be spending a lot of time together. You may be co-parenting well, making financial decisions, both working hard to create the life you want, and yet you feel lonely. So what is this loneliness about? It fundamentally is about not feeling seen or heard. So you can be with someone day in and day out. You can be conversing with them. You can even laugh from time to time. You can take joy in gardening together or raising children, whatever it is. But if you don't feel seen in the depths of your soul, in your yearnings, in your dreams, if you don't feel seen for who you really are, then loneliness is actually quite likely. So for the couple that looks like they have a really wonderful marriage and a great life, but there's not really much affection and the sex itself isn't satisfying, well, one or both of them are going to feel lonely. In fact, I want to point to that. There are a lot of people who feel really lonely in marriage because there isn't physical intimacy. There's a lack of affection. There's a lack of lovemaking, a lack of sex. And when you need to kind of protect yourself from the vulnerability of desire because you're going to be rejected, that can feel really lonely. It also feels lonely when you actually do have sex, but it feels like something more functional or mechanical, and you don't feel the remarkable merging of your souls. You don't feel the growth and the exploration and the surrender and the joy, the erotic energy. If that's not there, you can be having sex. You can even be having sex, let's say Monday and Thursday or Tuesday and Sunday, whatever. If you're going to schedule it like that, it's probably going to be spaced out. And you still can feel lonely. And it's this sort of ambient influence that's never really in the foreground because there's enough going on that's really good and it's easy to distract yourself. And what are you going to do with the loneliness anyway? It can feel like it'll be all consuming. If you dip your toe in, you're just going to be pulled down like one of those stories in Greek mythology where you put your toe in and then the underwater genies just pull you in and never to be seen again. That's a relationship you may have with loneliness. And so better to keep your attention on the surface and distract yourself with all kinds of things, working out, baking, childcare, whatever, because that loneliness can be so painful. So, does any of this speak to you? Is this something you experience every day? Is this something that just comes and bites you in the butt from time to time? There are so many variations on this, and it's really a very subtle, nuanced experience because it looks like you shouldn't feel lonely because you have a spouse in your life, plus or minus kids, and a purposeful work and all kinds of things going on. And yet, almost like carbon monoxide, meaning an invisible gas with a big impact, there's loneliness that really is hard to keep at bay. So if that's your situation, I want to give you a 4-step process to transform the loneliness into connection. the feeling unseen into feeling seen, the feeling unimportant to feeling cherished and respected. You get the idea. There is so much transformation possible. I say often, although it's been a while since I've said so on the podcast, that having a fantastic relationship is a learnable skill. And if you have loneliness in your soul, then here are some ways to learn the skill of letting go of that. So the first thing is so important. It's why I've spent this much time just describing the phenomenon, normalizing it, welcoming you to acknowledge it, because the first step is just to acknowledge that you do feel lonely. Don't succumb to the idea that you shouldn't, that you have so much going for you, that you have so much going for your relationship, and other people have it so much worse. If you feel lonely, then that is how you feel, and accepting that, acknowledging it, that is the first step in actually transforming and healing it. So, acknowledge that you feel lonely, step number one. Step number two is to explore the phenomenon. Journal about it. Maybe a journal prompt could be, I feel lonely when, or the way I know that I'm feeling lonely is. Those are two options. If you like to journal, if you don't like to journal, you can just have these questions rolling around sort of in the ambient landscape of your mind, just kind of simmering away, and every now and then you'll have some insight or observe something and understand your situation more, because it takes courage to look at this, to bring attention to loneliness, considering that you're successful professionally and it looks like you're successful personally. Why do you feel lonely? Well, that's what you're going to explore. Once you have some understanding of what is happening below the waterline in your life where the loneliness lurks, then step 3 is two-pronged. It's curiosity and vulnerability. You want to be curious about your partner's experience. You might even ask them, do you feel lonely? And for most marriages, that would be like, that's too intense to begin. If you can ask that in the culture of your marriage, go for it. But if that's too intense, you can start with, are you happy? Or how are you feeling about our marriage these days? Or if we were to put attention on some area of our marriage, what would you want to improve? There are many variations. So just ask a question or 2 or 3 that come naturally to you that essentially are invitations to your spouse to open up about their experience. That's where the curiosity comes in, and the vulnerability comes in with you revealing how you feel lonely. That you realized even though you love one another so much and you do so much together, that sometimes you feel lonely. And what's really important when you vulnerably share about your own loneliness is that you don't blame anybody. And you don't even blame any circumstance, but the most important thing is that you do not blame their spouse. You feeling lonely is not the result of something your spouse is doing or not doing. If you blame your spouse, that is not a vulnerable communication. That's an aggressive communication, even if you do it in a very soft, saccharine voice. So vulnerability means sharing what your experience is. How do you feel? You've noticed that you feel lonely because, and then you can share some of the things that you've identified through your journaling or just your daydreaming, having the question in your ambient attention. You can also just say, I feel lonely and I don't even know why. I don't want to, but I wanted you to know. In other words, when you share vulnerably, your purpose is for your partner to see you and for you to feel seen, because that creates connection, and connection is the antidote to loneliness in relationship. So I'm going to repeat the steps. The first one is just to acknowledge, accept, and be right with the fact that you feel lonely, even though you think you shouldn't. The second is to explore that feeling through journaling or otherwise. The third is to be curious about your partner's experience and vulnerably share your own. And the fourth is to consider some solutions or problem solving, anything you might want to adjust, or do differently, be differently. But I highly recommend that you are vigilant about not shifting from curiosity and vulnerability into solutions. If you go there too quickly, this whole thing is not going to be as successful. In fact, you might even discuss it the next day. Let things settle. Whatever it is, don't rush into the solutions so that you don't kind of bring any sense of urgency or move on from vulnerability before it's done. There's a real art to sitting in the vulnerability until you both take a breath or you feel a kind of gentle, delicious connection, and then you can exhale. It may be a lot more subtle than that, but it's when you feel connection that you can enjoy that feeling of connection and then subsequently transition into any kinds of solutions. And there isn't always a solution. Sometimes just sharing in this way is the solution, but in your particular circumstance, there is some specific solution, then that would be the next step to take. So I know that for many of you, just hearing me describe this will inspire you and have you kind of have in your mind the question of loneliness and see what arises, work with what I've shared, these 4 steps of noticing that you feel lonely, letting yourself feel that way, exploring the feeling, being curious and sharing vulnerably, and then if appropriate, looking for some solutions to create more connection. And maybe that's enough for you. I'm really glad to make this available on the podcast, which obviously is free. If this has spoken to you, or, even if you don't feel lonely, but you know someone else who does, please share it with other people. This is a free resource that I want people to take advantage of. And marriages are in such an intense state right now. So if you know someone who might be lonely, share the episode with them. It's really a kind thing to do. For those of you who want to go further with this, in creating more connection with your partner, in having the experience of feeling seen, cherished, and respected, read my book, Uncompromising Intimacy. I read the review earlier, which gives you a flavor for the book. As I said, it's available on Amazon or Audible, or you can click on the link in the show notes to get it. On Amazon, I think it's just $12.99, and the book is an easy read or an easy listen if you do it on Audible. I read it. And it consists of some instructions, stories, and exercises that you can implement in order to create more connection with your spouse, which in turn is the most incredible, successful antidote to feeling lonely within your relationship. And there are going to be some of you listening, particularly people who value depth, efficiency, going to the root cause of things, who don't want to try different things on their own and just want to transform this dynamic in your marriage. And for you, I invite you to reach out and contact me about private coaching. This is for you if you like results, You don't want to sit in loneliness any longer. You want to create more connection. And I'm talking emotional connection, sensual, sexual, erotic connection. You want to really up-level the culture of your marriage so that it is magnificent. It is an oasis of support. No matter how hard you work, you know that when you come home, you're going to feel better because you and your spouse have learned how to be present with yourselves and with one another in a way that creates really the most expansive, nourishing, sexy connection, more than you've ever imagined before. So if this is you are willing to invest the time and your resources and do the work to very efficiently get some profound results, reach out to me. But if you just want to check out the options, if you don't really want to put any time or effort into it, if you are someone who needs to understand everything before taking action, and so what you want to do is a whole bunch of analysis, then this is not a good offer for you. But if you like action, you like results, you like setting goals, making them happen, you either are clear on your desires or you're ready for me to help you clarify them so that your desires can become your reality, then I would love to work with you and see your internal world and your marriage transform in the most profound and beautiful ways. So with that, I invite you to notice if you're lonely at all. And if you are, take the next step that is right for you.